Welcome to Magic.ai, the operating system for hospitality. At Magic, we know an operating system is more than just software and systems. It's about people, because hospitality is nothing without them. So supporting the hospitality community is our number one goal.
I think there needs to be more of a support system. Like, you have to love this business and you have to love every aspect of it, including sharing tribal knowledge on what is successful and also tribal knowledge of what is a failure.
Founded by lifelong experts, we're building the place where everyone in hospitality, from seasoned pros to first-timers, can gather, share, and grow together. Plus, we're crafting scalable tools and AI-supported software to boost your business. Dive into our vibrant community platform packed with meaningful conversations and robust tools and templates designed just for you. Need more? Our custom software solutions have got you covered. From recruiting and staffing to digital playbooks and dashboards, we're working on building a unique hub of resources unlike any other. Magic is your single point of origin for important conversations, accessible tools, valuable insights, and more. Join us at Magic.ai. The evolution of hospitality is here.
The way that the industry was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, is not the same industry that it is today. There's a lot of crossover. We still need to know how to cook. We still need to know how to use a knife, cutting board, pots and pans. That doesn't change. But the way kitchens are run and the expectations of the people coming in the kitchens are different. So as a chef, we have to be nimble and adapt.
André Natera has spent 27 years of cooking with top chefs and running some of Austin's finest kitchens, and he now inspires upcoming chefs through his podcast, Chefs PSA. He won recognition in Dallas and Austin and supports future culinary stars with his show, past projects like Run the Pass, and a book series filled with advice and humor for cooks. His experience with leading culinary groups drives his mission to mentor and educate through Chefs PSA, sharing his vast culinary knowledge and passion.
I think social media makes things very easy compared to the old days. If I was to give someone advice, and this is just, super generic advice, but I would just say, look, write a really nice DM and then just copy and paste it and send it to the 20 best chefs in your city. Start there. Like, someone's going to respond. When you're young and you feel like Wolverine, it doesn't seem like a big deal because, you get 2 hours of sleep and you can show up the next day and you feel fine, but it does eventually catch up with you. You need to take good care of your feet. You need to watch what you're eating. You need to watch how you're feeling. You need to drink a lot of water, get into healthy habits.
Chef, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's really cool to be here, and it's nice to see what you're doing. Exciting projects.
Yeah, it's awesome it is an exciting project, and it's really exciting to talk to you because, well, for so many reasons. I'm a fan, and as you mentioned, kind of in our pre-interview a while back, we met once in Austin. But I've kind of been following you, and it's been amazing to watch you kind of take this foray into a whole new world, still culinary adjacent, but not in kitchens now, and moving more towards a media company. And so there's so much to talk about. And I can say up front that 45 minutes is not going to be enough time for us. I know that already. But I think it'd be great to just kind of dig in on a bunch of it. Your latest book just came out in June. And it's called Bad Cooks Everywhere, which I love. I think it's hilarious. It's a sequel to Bad Sue, Good Chef. It follows a recent culinary graduate named Alex in his first years out of school as he kind of struggles through several different kitchens. Bad Cooks Everywhere teaches the importance, I think, really of humility and hard work, but also like perseverance and a respect for others in your environment when, cooking in professional kitchens, right? What are some other soft skills that you think are vital right now for a cook to have in a professional kitchen?
What's really interesting about professional kitchens right now is we're in a transition time. So the way that the industry was, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, is not the same industry that it is today. There's a lot of crossover. We still need to know how to cook. We still need to know how to use a knife, cutting board, pots and pans. That doesn't change. But the way kitchens are run and the expectations of the people coming in the kitchens are different. So as a chef, we have to be nimble and adapt. What's interesting about that, and I think probably the most important skill that any chef needs to be successful, and maybe I'll say two. I would say the first one is it's a human resources business. You're dealing with people day in and day out. You're
100%.
dealing with food, but you're dealing with people every single day. Unless you're cooking by yourself, you're always going to be working with other people. And I think learning how to work with other people is probably the most important skill. And what's really important about that is you have to understand that there's different personalities. Not everyone is the same. Some people are very experienced. Some people are still working in the kitchen from 20 years ago and they're still there today. And some people are brand new and don't understand why that person acts that way, who's been in the kitchen forever. So knowing how to navigate different personality types, I would say, is probably one of the number one skills. The other skill is the chef's mindset. And this is something I talk about a lot on Chefs PSA. And I think being a chef, especially when you look at the really top end chefs and some of the greatest chefs ever, right? The Mount Rushmore type. When you look at the Thomas Kellers and the Rene Redzepis and the Ferran Adrias or the Roca brothers, one thing that a lot of these amazing chefs have in common is that they are unique and they think different. And no one ever looked at Ferran and said, you're copying so-and-so, right? They march to the beat of their own drum and they act as the exception to the rule. And I think one of the things that a lot of chefs start out their career with is like, well, you have to figure out who you are. When you start cooking, usually you think you know everything and it looks easy and I'm going to set the world on fire. And then you realize, oh, it's not so easy. I don't know what I'm doing. Please help me. And so you start copying other people's food and you start replicating, you get inspired, and you get really good at making other people's food. And then you think, I want to do my own food, but you don't even know what that is. And then eventually you get to the point where you say, okay, this is my identity and this is what I'm going to do. But then you have to ask yourself the question, is it truly your identity? Is it truly what you do? Or is it just what you've learned throughout your career, got really good at making someone else's food, but you put your little twist on it, right? You added a little something to it. But then you look at these other chefs that I had mentioned earlier, and it's like, well, they're the exception because they learned, they thought, this is who I am. I'm going to learn what I need to do, and then I'm going to create something completely unique that is me. And you could see my identity on a plate. And if you see someone, and I'm just kind of making this up, but if you see someone that's done this forage dish in Nebraska, they got it from Rene Redzepi. They were inspired by so-and-so. No one's ever looking at Rene Redzepi saying he was inspired by the chef in Nebraska, right? It's not the other way around. So those would be the two things to answer your questions. Like the soft skills is number one, learn how to navigate personalities, understand that you're dealing with people day in and day out. That's not going to change until we get robots in the kitchen. And then the other thing is, how do you become the exception to the rule? Because when you think like everyone, you wind up just like everyone. But when you think different, well, that's the opportunity to wind up somewhere different.
And they're two really different things in a way, because I would say, it's fascinating because not everybody in the industry can do both, right? It's challenging to be able to innovate and think creatively and execute and be technical, right? That's kind of like one world within hospitality, but the other world is the humanizing element. You have to be good with people. You have to know how to relate to your coworkers. You have to have empathy. You have to have that willingness to like jump in when you're needed. Like that's a whole different thing. And it's rare, I think, in some cases that people carry both of those traits.
So I read Bad Cooks Everywhere, and right, there's this part where, so people, when cooks are starting out, right, they have to fall in line, right? They're cooking other people's foods for a while, right? Maybe 10 years you're following others' footsteps, like you just said. When can you, or when is it appropriate for you to start thinking outside the box? When is it appropriate for you to have that chef's mindset? Because it feels like as a cook, for many years, you're not really supposed to have an out of the box thinking, right? You're supposed to be like, I don't know a lot about Rene Redzepi's, coming up through kitchens, but I imagine steps were taken and, and then they step out of the box.
And then he really started innovating.
Right. So when do you innovate and when do you, because if you're also, I think being a good cook, right, is about following direction for a while, right? It's about taking other direction and being humble and shucking peas, for example, or, I zested lemons for hours. just
Yeah,
standing
yeah.
in one
Did you
place
do it?
zesting
Did you do it
lemons.
like this, or did you do it like that? Like, what's the right way, right?
I did. Right.
Depending
Yeah.
on who you work for, they're going to tell you, no, it's like this, and someone else say, no, it's like that, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
Well, to answer your question, and I wish it was a simple answer. I wish I could say this is the way it is, and that's the way it should be, but it's not true. And what is true is that depending on the circumstances, depending on the individual, and depending on who you're working with or working for, is going to really dictate when that's possible. So I'll expand upon what I mean by that a little bit. So if you're working for a chef and that chef is all about collaboration and creativity and wants to grow their sous chefs and their cooks and says, hey, I want everyone to get their ideas on the menu and I want you to express yourself. That's one thing, because now at an early stage in your career, you're exposed to that and you start learning how to work those creative muscles, right? Let's say you work in a different kitchen that says, hey, I'm allowing you to come up with ideas, but those ideas need to look like I came up with them, because the restaurant says Andre's on the door. And so the food needs to look like it's Andre. So I'm going to allow you to participate, but you need to make it look like my food. So we're serving this type of food. You can't give me, if we're serving French, don't give me enchiladas, right? I know you want to be creative, but it needs to fall within these parameters. So then you're able to flex some technical creative muscle, but maybe it's not exactly the type of food that you want to create. So there's different scenarios. And then, the other thing I would say, this is going back to my earlier point, is yes, we talk about the greats and they are the exception to the rule and they do something different, but that doesn't mean it's better, because sometimes it's just okay to cook good food, right? Sometimes you just want to make something that's been done and it's classic. And you know what? This is the tradition of where I come from. This is my family's recipes. This is the town I'm from. And I want to make this food. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm sorry.
Or
I'm
this
just
is
trying
what
to
my customers want, right? Like,
right. This is what I want to do this because this is what I enjoy cooking. This is what my customers want. So it's not a straight line that I can say this works in every single kitchen. It's a time and place situation. It's who you are. And there's a lot of factors that play into when do you develop your own identity. But I would say in general, so if I had to give a general answer, let's just say, 70% of the time, I would say when you're a sous chef, you start to develop your own ideas because you start getting one or two dishes on the menu, right? And then, you get that itch, like, I want to do my food. I want to do my food. And then you get your first executive chef job or your first chef de cuisine job, and you get to put more dishes on the menu. And then you realize you go through a couple of years of kind of figuring that out, of like, who am I? What do I want to do? What does my food look like? You make a lot of mistakes, because I know I've made this mistake. Chef, I'm sure you made the same mistake. Like, when you're young, let me show everything I know on one plate. Let me show all my tricks.
Never,
let me impress,
never. I never
let me
did
impress
that.
everybody with what I know. And then it takes some time to just kind of pull back and say, okay, like, I don't need to show you everything. Like, I just want to make this good and delicious.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an evolution as a cook and as a chef before you kind of hit your stride.
Well, and restraint, right? Like, restraint is such an important thing to learn. And it's probably the hardest, I would argue, because a lot of the times when you should be showing restraint, you're kind of young, you're coming up, you feel like you've got something to prove, you want to execute, you want to make your chef or your boss proud or whatever, right? There's all of those things. And then I feel like as I've gotten older, I've realized the importance of restraint, the importance of holding back. There's nothing wrong with like 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 things on the plate. That's it, but that are executed perfectly. And it takes a while to get there from a mindset perspective. You feel like you got to keep adding and doing all this stuff and, whatever, like garnishes. At some point you're like, enough. Like, just focus on the technique, focus on the quality of the product, and let that stuff really speak for itself, and that's kind of a whole nother mindset.
No, I agree. Last night I was watching, I was on social media and I was looking at this Instagram reel of someone eating at Astor Jabari in Spain. And they were talking about how simple it was. And I think it was the number 2 on World's 50 Best. It was like a bowl of peas. And then they had like some sliced, I don't remember what type of charcuterie it was, but it was all very simple and saying, there was a dish that was just like 2 prawns on the plate. And it's like they're able to execute something so simple, so perfect at the peak of when it's just delicious. And you can't hide behind anything when you do less, right? It's like the old expression of the artist, like, draw me a perfect circle, right? Just a perfect circle is extremely difficult to do. So I think one of the challenges that a lot of younger chefs have is they want to show you everything on a plate, and they do it okay. So I'm going to show you 20 things that I do okay, versus the experienced chefs say, I'm going to show you one thing that I do perfectly.
Totally. Totally.
So speaking of techniques, we've talked about a couple of soft skills. What are some top hard skills that you recommend a back of house person develop early on in their career?
Knife skills, right? So, I mean, that's going to be the foundation of everything. Is like, learn how to cut everything. And what's really interesting when I say cut everything, like, people will focus on like, okay, well, I could chop an onion really fast. Okay, well, now that you could chop it fast, how many different ways do you know how to chop it, right? Because maybe in this restaurant, they say this is perfect. And in that restaurant, they say this is perfect. Okay, so now you know how to chop it 4 or 5 different ways. Now, how do you make it perfect and fast, right? What's the best brunoise you could do? Is it petal by petal? Is it, the mark up here, white like julienne, and then turn it, and then every single restaurant's going to tell you there's a perfect way to do it. Well, how many different ways do you know how to execute that? And then, do you know how to work with potatoes? Do you know how to work with tomatoes? Do you know how to work with eggplants? Do you know how to work with, hard squashes? Do you know how to work with now different types of meat, right? So, okay, you could butcher a tenderloin. Well, maybe you could cut some ribeyes. Well, what about something more complicated that you don't see every day on the menu? If you know how to butcher a chicken, for example, I tell people, like, before you go butcher a whole pig, know how to butcher a chicken. It's kind of the same animal in a sense, just smaller. So learn these skills, like focus on the basics, and then gradually expand to the more complicated version. So, okay, you can cut every single vegetable. Now, can you do artichokes? Right, because that's the day that no one wants to show up when it's artichoke day. It's like, just get the ones in the can or whatever. But so I think knife skills is going to be the foundation. The second thing I would say is braising. I would say probably above everything, braising might be one of the most complex techniques, because it's a layered technique where you're going to learn sauce work in the braising, you're going to learn searing in the braising, you're going to learn long cooking methods, you're going to learn flavor development, you're going to learn complexity, you're going to learn when it's not cooked enough, you're going to learn when it's maybe cooked too much. So I would say, like, knife skills, braising would probably be the 2 foundational techniques. Like, if you just braise all day, and when I say braise all day, I mean like everything, chicken, beef, pork, etc., and you cut all day, you will be a very good cook, regardless of what they throw at you.
That's so funny. When I used to bring, back in the day when restaurants had stages, and I would bring stages in, and I think they still do to some degree, but it's certainly less than it was back when I was had my first restaurant. I would ask if a stage was looking for a full-time job, we would ask them to make a burger and a soup. Those are the 2 things, because I felt like they were so wildly different, but they allowed you to see inside of their mind in terms of, like, what is your method for forming that patty, cooking that patty, the temperature you're going to get me, the condiments or the accompaniments that you think should go with that burger, and why, right? We talk about that. And then the soup was always about, is the vegetable cooked enough? Is the broth hot enough? Is the broth have enough, aromatics and flavor, and, the development of that recipe, even though you had a very short amount of time to do it. It's like a great way, I think, to see inside somebody's mind and see their true technique, because it typically soups also involve a lot of knife cuts, and right. So you want to kind of like find a way to kind of get a better idea, a better sense of how those cooks operate, right, in their own mind when they're kind of taken out of the environment.
And what was like, if I'm interviewing on the stage and I make a pureed soup, is that good or bad? Like, if I just throw everything in it?
It all depends. Right? Because, like, I love a pureed soup. I mean, we used to call it baby food at one of my restaurants. It was like, who's making the baby food? But good pureed soup is great, right? Like a great potato squash soup or something that's pure, like a butternut soup. Oh man, like
a butternut squash in the fall with a little brown butter.
Oh, dude, I can't. And with like some little, crunchy pepitas or something. I mean, like,
Sage.
That's my. Yeah. It's all that stuff is like, it's so delicious and so comforting. But I think, like, I would prefer to see a broth-based soup for sure if I had to choose, just like in that moment. Like you're saying, a little bit less to hide behind, right?
Yeah. When I used to do cooking interviews, when I would hire anything above sous chef, I would usually make someone do some type of cooking practical, and it was always pretty simple. You can have as much time as you want. If you need 2 days, I'll give you 2 days. but I'm going to give you 4 ingredients. I'm going to give you a whole chicken, a whole fish, a live lobster, and an artichoke, and then just give me 4 dishes with those things. And you can use anything you want. And it was really interesting to see and the reason I would do that is like a lot of people don't know how to clean an artichoke. So it was like I'm going to try and throw you off your game a little bit. But it's interesting just with the chicken, and I'll stick with that for just a moment. With the chicken, it's like, okay, do you know how to truss? Do you know how to butcher? Do you know how to brine? Do you know how to roast? Do you know how to pan sear? Like, do you just cut the breast off and go from there? Or do you make a farce out of the thigh? Like, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to make a stock out of the bone? So it was like, you could see how much someone really understood about food just with the chicken. Because if usually the entry-level guys that didn't get the job, or girls, right, the entry-level people would just cut the breast off and sear that with the sauce. But the more advanced people would like, okay, I'm going to make something out of the skin. I'm going to make stock out of the bones. I'm going to take the thigh and make a farce and, do all this crazy stuff. So it was really interesting. Like, you give someone a very boring ingredient. I don't always say chicken's boring, but it's pretty common. It's like, okay, well, now let's see what you got. Because you can't hide behind anything else. So
yeah, there was a chef that I worked with for a little bit in Boston named Gordon Hammersley, who had
God, the best roast chicken in the world.
He was known for his roast chicken.
Did I scoop you?
No, it's all good. That's exactly where I was going. He was known for his roast chicken. Took it very seriously, and it was one of those things. It's like, you go there and you would go to Hammersley's and you'd sit there and you'd order the chicken. And you immediately realize that half of the chicken or more that you've eaten in your life is total bullshit. Like, people don't know how to cook chicken. Like, it's like all this, it's like your eyes would just open up and all of a sudden you're, oh, okay, this is how you cook a chicken, right? And that's so interesting. It is one of those mediums that just, it proves your ability.
What was the method? Do you remember?
He just
had
well, I can't tell you. No, he had a way of preparing the bird that it did go through like a dry rub basically situation, right? Mm-hmm. But just super high heat, right? So you'd get that like amazing crispy skin. You'd get that really succulent meat. It was like all of the best things at once. I want to
had enough salt for me, which was
for sure seasoned.
Yeah.
I want to take a little bit of a step back for a second, and talk about getting hired. Because in your book, Alex kind of gets his first job through a recommendation from his culinary school mentor, and I want to kind of dig into that a little bit with you, and talk about 2 different things. One is culinary school in general. There's a lot of feelings out there in the world right now. I went to culinary school. I went to New England Culinary Institute myself here in Vermont. I benefited from it tremendously and got a ton out of it. It was an incredible place. There was a lot of like firsts that I experienced in my career there, right? Like visiting my first cattle farm, seeing my first abattoir live in action and animals getting taken down and butchered and fully processed. I went foraging in the woods with my professors for mushrooms, like all of these things that I wouldn't have had, exposure to otherwise at that time in my life. But culinary school, I think lately has kind of fallen in regards to where people put it, in terms of how beneficial it is for a cook, right? We've seen a lot of culinary schools, mostly local regional culinary schools, go out of business. It's really kind of the big ones are left, right? Johnson Wales, CIAs of the world. So I'm curious to kind of get your take on culinary school, whether it's worth it or not. That's kind of part one of my question. And the other part of my question is just about cooks who are looking to move into kitchens. Like, if they're interested, what do you see as ways for them to get into kitchens if they don't have the experience?
Mm-hmm. Here's my thought on culinary schools, and I hate to say I'm walking the razor's edge on my opinion, but I went to culinary school as you did, and I went in 1995, and I think I paid $10,000 for culinary school, so it wasn't a lot back then. And then I've also taken continuing education at all the CIAs, so San Antonio, New York, St. Helena. I've taken an online culinary school, Ruby, for no other reason, just that I like education. I like food. I like learning about food. So I didn't need to take the continuing education. I just wanted to, right? It was by choice. And so if I could do it all over again, I would go to school. But I also read about a book a week. Like I'm addicted to knowledge. I read a lot. I study everything. Anything that I feel like I could learn, it's almost a problem, right? Because I'm addicted to just learning and knowing how to do things. So for me, culinary school was beneficial. However, I will say that, do you need culinary school to be a chef? No. And I've never hired an executive chef, a sous chef, or really anyone be like, oh, sorry, you're not getting the job because you didn't go to school. That's never happened in my entire career. And I don't know anyone that's ever said that, like, hey, you can't get the job because you don't have a degree or you didn't graduate, or sorry, you quit in the 11th month. You're not getting the job. Like, that's never happened. So I think there's a misconception that you need school in order to become a chef. Now, I will say that some people do need it. Some people will become a better chef because they don't know anybody. The teachers are going to open doors for them. They're going to send them on sabbatical overseas or whatever. So they need school. And there's other people that, and you know this, they just got it. Like I worked with a girl one time. She was 18 years old. She was from Brazil. And she's like, I want to learn how to cook. And I threw her on the line in a busy restaurant that we were doing about 500 covers a night. And within 3 months, she was out hustling 15, 20-year cooks on the line. And I was like, holy shit, she's great. And then she went on and, she worked at some 3 Michelin star restaurants. Shortly after that, went to a restaurant of the world's 50 best. By the time she was 21, she was a sous chef in a restaurant of the world's 50 best. By the time she was 22, she left the industry because she's like, I'm bored. This is just not challenging for me. So for some people, it's like they got it, and it's extremely rare. Like they come through the kitchen, and I'm sure you've worked with, I can think of about 5 people in my career that I've come across, like they're going to be someone, and you see it on day one. But then there's other people that's like, hey, you might need to go to culinary school. I don't think you get it. And maybe, or before you go to culinary school, because I think this also needs to be said, you might want to work in a kitchen first.
Yeah.
You might want to see that you really like this, because what you see on television or what you see on social media is just the glamorous aspects. Like they're not going to show you a 15-hour show of just standing making salad, like just on repeat. We're not going to, that show wouldn't sell. Like, what are you doing for this 15 hours?
So how do they get in there? Like, if they don't have the ability to have a relationship with a culinary school that they can leverage to get into like a great restaurant, is it, I remember the days, and I'm going to sound like an old man here, and I kind of am, I hate to say it, but where you could literally show up at the back door of a restaurant and you could get a job. Like when I was in Italy, that's what I did. I would research the restaurants that I really wanted to work at, and I would go. And I remember standing at the back door of a restaurant in Florence, literally looking in and watching with my knife kit in my hand until somebody was like, hey, like throws you, an onion or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know if those things still happen, if the world is still like that, but like, how do they, if they're interested and they're driven and they're passionate and they think they want to make a run of it, what's the next step?
Well, I think social media makes things very easy compared to the old days, because you could, I mean, if I was to give someone advice, and this is just, super generic advice, but I would just say, look, write a really nice DM, and then just copy and paste it and send it to the 20 best chefs in your city. Start there. Like someone's going to respond. And and here's a little secret when it comes to social media that I think people don't get is, like, I have a pretty decent size account on social media, but my account that I have with Chefs PSA is very interactive, meaning I get a lot of DMs daily. I read them all. I might not respond to them all, but I see them all. So I know if I'm getting a lot, and what I do is receive DMs and I start conversations, that I know the other chef sees them, right? They might not respond, but I know they definitely see them. So, I mean, I would just say, find the chefs that you want to work for, as many as you can. Someone will respond, get into their kitchen, be willing to start at the bottom. Don't have such a big ego that you feel like, hey, but I'm worth more. And even though I don't bring anything of value to the team just yet, I promise you one day I'll be good. Well, you'll get the money when you are good, or you'll get the position when you're ready, but be willing to start wherever. And just be relentless, because that first no is going to suck, especially when you're not used to getting rejected, especially if you're really young. And the only rejection you've had is when your first significant other broke up with you. right? That might be the only rejection you've ever faced. And then now all of a sudden you're getting people saying, hey, no, 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 no. So that first no is going to sound, man, you just crushed my dreams. I'll never be a chef. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. You're going to get told no hundreds of times. Get that rejection therapy out of the way and just keep sending messages. Someone will respond, and then go in there, mouth closed, eyes open, willing to work hard, awake and ready, and start to understand how kitchens operate, understand what the cadence is like in that particular kitchen. And then just be relentless. I would say you don't need to go to school, but you do have to be relentless if you want to get into the kitchens. And I do want to say this, like, it's really important to be selective early on in your career, the kitchens that you want to get into. And I would say to someone that's listening, if you're a young cook, as soon as you could just sit down, think about it for an hour, talk to someone, say, I want to be this type of chef. I want to be the 3 Michelin star chef, or I want to have the best barbecue restaurant. I want to be the chef of a cruise ship. I want to work at this amazing resort in Hong Kong. Okay, then work in those types of places, because the only way you're going to learn how to run those places is by working in those places. Because even though it's all cutting boards and knives and pots and pans, there is a different cadence and rhythm and style that those kitchens run. And if you want to learn how to run those kitchens, you'll learn a lot faster if you're in those kitchens.
Yeah, and be willing.
So
sorry, I just want to add one thing, which is be willing to do the jobs that other people don't want to do. That was always like one of the things that I was taught very early on. Like, whatever that is, it's a great way for you to show your level of dedication, right? Sorry, Carolyn.
Well, it's okay. So, Ian, this is a perfect segue. In Bad Cooks everywhere, Alex is late to his first day when he shows up a minute early, right? Because he gets there and he learns that in this particular kitchen, to be on time is to be 30 minutes early. And then he goes to his second kitchen, and then he realizes the chef isn't even there. And then the chef owner is 30 minutes late. And okay, so kitchens vary a ton, right? Different kitchen cultures vary. And so you have to be nimble or adaptive to figure out what type of kitchen you're going to go work in and sort of figure out the culture. How do you suggest getting ready for the first day as a new cook in a new kitchen that I guess you can sort of know from the outside what the culture is, but is it really about starting and paying attention to the culture?
So by the way, I would say first read Bad Cooks Everywhere, because that'll tell you, like, hey, this type of kitchen probably runs like this, and this type of kitchen probably runs like that. But let's just assume you didn't read the book. Shame on you. Go get the book. But I would say, like, do a little bit of research, like go online, talk to ChatGPT, whatever you got to do. Talk to somebody that might be able to give you a slight insight of what it's like to work in that particular kitchen, because there's always a certain cadence in every single kitchen. Certain kitchens are like very particular that it's the right way and this is the only way. And a lot of kitchens and chefs speak in absolutes, meaning like this is the best way to do it. Anyone else that doesn't do it this way is a hack, or they don't know what they're doing, right? Every chef is going to tell you this is the best way. And I understand why that's being said. It's not necessarily because it's the best way. It's because if there's a lot of different ways to do it, then you'll end up with chaos in the kitchen. So you have to talk in absolutes because you need it to be done a certain way. But I would say if you're doing the kitchen, and let's just say it's your day one, you step into the kitchen, you don't know, I would say two things. You can never work clean enough, and you can never work fast, right? So if you're working very clean, no one's ever going to tell you in a kitchen like, oh, no, you're working a little too clean, make it a little bit more messy. Or they're never going to say you're working way too fast, slow down. We like our cooks to work nice and slow. Like, just try to match the pace of everyone else, and then pay attention to the details. Like, okay, they're all working like this. They're all cutting the tape a certain way, cut the tape that way. They're all making sure everything gets put on the shelf a certain way, do that. Go into the walk-in and see where everything is. So when they send you in there, and they say, hey, go get the apples, you remember where the apples are. And here's a little trick that I do whenever a new kitchen, I tell this to cooks, is like, and it's kind of weird. So it's like, don't do this when everyone's watching you. So make sure no one's watching, but go into the cooler if you're in a brand new kitchen and just touch the apples and say apples. Then touch the onions and say onions, and touch everything and say it. So that way you kind of remember. So when they send you back in and say, go get go get me the chervil. Okay. Chervil right here. Boom. You go get it. Because there's nothing worse than being the new cook in the kitchen, because chefs will do this to you. Like, go get me this. And you're in the cooler for like what seems like an eternity. And then you come out as like, sorry, chef, I couldn't find it. It's like, and then they go, and it's almost like it's embarrassing for the cook. It's frustrating for the chef. So just take a minute, learn where everything is, see how people are working, pick up on the cues and say, okay, I noticed that every single time a chef drops something on the floor, they quickly take out a broom. Okay, well then you do that too. You don't get a pass. Like figure out what everyone's doing, figure out what the culture is and adapt to that.
The only caveat I would say to that is, in my world, there is something as too fast. And I only bring that up because I had one of my cooks who will remain nameless, but I'm sure he's listening, so he's going to know it's about him. He would come in every day just firing on all cylinders, like probably 3 or 4 espressos deep, just like frenetic. And I was like, buddy, take a deep breath, slow down, like let's, and it was just, it became a thing with him. And it was like an ongoing joke with our entire team. I love him to this day, but my God, it was just like, dude, relax.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Don't be
we're all going to the
dangerously
same
fast.
destination,
I
don't
guess
be
you're right.
dangerously fast.
Yeah. Don't be dangerously fast where you're going to hurt yourself or you're going to mess up the food.
Right.
Speaking
So,
of,
I mean, so it's more important that the food is right than that you're fast.
Yeah, to an extent. Depends on the restaurant. So some places, I mean, if you read the Bad Cooks Everywhere, there's this chapter where he's like in the worst restaurant ever.
The worst,
like,
right? Yep.
They didn't care about the quality. It was like, just keep it under the heat lamp for 2 hours, just get it out. And I hate to say it, there's a lot of restaurants like that. And I wouldn't want to work in a restaurant like that, but they do exist. So if you're in them, you got to figure out how they work.
And speaking of going too fast and too hard, burnout is a real thing. And you've already given an example of that in our conversation with the young chef that you worked with from Brazil. It's a real thing in the industry. I think we're talking about it more and more now. We've gone through some movements that have kind of pulled back the curtain on a lot of the industry's worst practices. And we're kind of in a new place now. And yet, like, workers are still overworked, pretty much underpaid to a large degree, lacking resources and support. And so I guess I'd be curious to hear about what you see as some solutions to those issues and what you would recommend for cooks who might be feeling burned out even right now as they're listening.
Burnout is such a complex subject. And I feel like just to even start talking about it, you have to talk about it for a long time because a lot of times people just take that one little thing that you said and then run with it without really understanding that it's a case-by-case basis and it's an individual sport. So what burns out one person doesn't burn out the other person. So I would say first and foremost, like the best advice I could give anyone is there's not a job out there that's worth your mental health or your physical health, period. Like I would start right there. There's not an amount of money that's worth trading your sanity or getting you sick. Like, let's start there. Now,
100%
I would also say this when it comes to burnout is a lot of times I feel that what people attribute to burnout isn't necessarily burnout. It's just I don't like the job. And what I mean by that is and I'm sure, Chef, you could relate to this. Sometimes I've been in kitchens where I love it and I'm passionate and I'm switched on and I've worked 70, 80, 90 hours this week and I don't want to go home. And people say, Chef, you should go home. It's like, I don't want to. I'm having so much fun here. I'm creative. I love my team. I love being around these people. I get the thrill and excitement of being at work. It's like the kid who's in front of the video game and the mom has to bring them food because they won't leave their room, right? Like you love it. And then you take that same person and you put them in a kitchen where they don't like the chef. They're not creative. They don't like the team. And 10 hours, they're burned out, right? So two extreme examples where one person, why could they work 90 hours and be happy? And why can this person barely make it through 10 without thinking, it's the worst thing ever. So a lot of it has to do with, I would say, start there. Like, do you like the job? Because if you don't like the job, that's where you need to begin the conversation. So I would also say, look at that. Now, I'm not saying there isn't physical and mental burnout, and kitchens are a perfect storm for that. The tickets keep coming in. They never stop. They annoy you when they come in a little bit too late or a little bit too early, and the modifiers, and that person burned the steak and I'm waiting on it to sell the rest of my order. Like, it's a pressure cooker. So there is this thing going on in kitchens that it doesn't matter where in the world you are. We kind of all face some of those same pressures regardless. But I don't have the answer to how to make kitchens less pressure in there. It is kind of a pressure sport that we've all signed up to be in. So I think getting that out of your mind that it's ever going to get easier, because it doesn't. It gets easier when you get better as a cook. So a lot of young cooks think, when will it get easier? When will the orders slow down? When will we have a slow day? It's like, well, don't wish for that, because that means your restaurant's going to close. That means you're going to be out of a job. What you need to do is focus on getting better, because when you get better, it does get easier. So I would say that's another part to discuss with burnout. And then the last piece I would say with regards to burnout, and this is something that I deal with now, is that, I'm not extremely unhealthy. And I was always pretty healthy. I used to be an athlete, but my knees are screwed up. My back is screwed up. I'm achy. My elbows hurt. My shoulder hurts. And it's like, man, I shouldn't feel the way I feel right now just by simply working in kitchens. But I wish I had taken a little bit better care of myself when I was in the kitchens. And I would say, like, when you're young and you heal like Wolverine, it doesn't seem like a big deal, because you get 2 hours of sleep and you can show up the next day and you feel fine. But it does eventually catch up with you. Your feet, you need to take good care of your feet. You need to watch what you're eating. You need to watch how you're feeling. You need to drink a lot of water, get into healthy habits. Say no occasionally to going out for a beer or for a drink at the end of the shift. Like, sometimes a good night's sleep will do you wonders. So I would say start focusing on your health later on, because it just shows up just like that. Like all of a sudden you're here, and the next, like, whoa, when did that start hurting? And it just shows up. So I thought I took really good care of myself. And even now I'm realizing, I could have done a better job. So I would say do not underestimate your health and your mental health with that.
So, Chef, you took a step out of the kitchen and you are still working with food and with cooks, and you're doing a lot of education and writing and media things. Your podcast is very successful. How did you make the decision to step out of the kitchen? And was that a challenging decision for you? How did that land?
It wasn't an easy decision, I'll tell you that. But I'll tell you, the last job I had, I really enjoyed. It was the best job I've ever had. And part of the dilemma was I didn't think of a job that I would enjoy more than that one. So I thought to myself, if I'm going to leave this job, I'm going to have to do something else.
On a high note. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's also part of, going in my mind is like, I want to retire undefeated, right? Like a lot of fighters, like they go in and they keep fighting and they start losing, at the end of their career. And I felt like, I want to step away on a high note, because I don't want to kind of tarnish my legacy. So I that was part of it. The other part of it is, this is during COVID when a lot of these thoughts were going through my head. And one of the things that was going on is I am very passionate about mentoring chefs and helping cooks become chefs and helping chefs become good chefs. Like, it's something that I'm passionate about. The dozen or so chefs that directly reported to me in my last job are all now very successful head chefs, executive chefs. And I like to think that I had a part in their success of helping them grow. So I was passionate about that. So when COVID hit, I realized I had about 200 employees that worked for me that I didn't finish mentoring and coaching. It was like I felt like there was work to be done, and I recognized that the food part is fun, like the cooking part is fun, and you get a lot of enjoyment out of that. But I've never had more enjoyment than seeing people succeed. Like, to me, that was even more enjoyable than to see people become successful chefs or achieve their dreams. That felt better than any award or service I've ever.
100%. Totally agree.
And so when I was thinking about this, I thought I want to figure out a way to still give back to the cooks that I felt like I had unfinished business with. So, true story. I'm sitting down. I'm watching the UFC fights with Chef Matthew Peters, the Bocuse d'Or winner. And this is during COVID, and we're looking at Instagram. It's like, oh, look at this celebrity chef making a salad. Look at that. Like, every single chef at that time was like, they didn't know what to do because all the restaurants are closed. Like, we'll just do cooking demos, and they were all really bad. Right? It's like, look at this what I'm making. I got some lettuce and I got some salmon.
That's so true. Remember that shit we were doing? That shit we were doing was wild. What were we doing? just like making lasagna at home, showing everybody
Yes,
a
yes.
step by step. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
like it was like 30-minute Instagram videos of how to make a salad. So as I'm
Yeah.
watching that,
Yeah.
I'm talking with Matt, and he says, "Why don't you just, he's kind of being an asshole about it. He's like, why don't you just take your stupid beard and just record yourself talking shit?" Not showing your face. I was like, that's kind of funny. So I thought maybe I should do something kind of snarky like that. But I realized during this time is like everyone was teaching you how to cook during COVID, but no one was talking about how are you going to reopen your restaurant? How are you going to succeed in this basically this reset of the industry? How are you going to succeed in that? And I felt like, look, I don't need to know how to make a salad. I don't need to know how to sear another fish, but I think this other conversation needs to be had and no one's talking about it. So during that time, I started a podcast, and I had 2 seasons of a show called Run the Pass. And it was all about that, like how to reopen your restaurants, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't that great. And I realized, you know what, I'm going to take some time and figure this out. But I realized that there was this big void in our industry that no one was addressing. And so that's when I really started to think about Chefs PSA. And it initially started as a sarcastic joke amongst me and my friends. Like, I'm going to post something funny that I think is funny, that they will think is funny, just to call out some bad behavior. And then it just kind of grew organically into what it is now. But the initial thought was, how do I help cooks become chefs, and how do I help chefs become better chefs? And that is really the foundation of it into what it is now.
I was just going to say the voice has changed a little bit. It's been interesting to watch, right? Like, I think there's an element of it that I love, which is, it's kind like, I think I've mentioned to you, it's like kind of a little tongue in cheeky, right? And then, but within that, there's like real quality, tangible, kind of introspective moments where it's kind of like, I can tell that you're thinking about your experience in your past, and you're offering kind of best case or best practices through, your platform in a way that actually hits with people. And I think it's cool. It's a fun, you've kept it fun, which I think is important,
Right. Well, what's interesting about this, chef, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, is you could pick up your phone and you could pretty much be on the phone with any chef that someone is a household name, right? You could pick them up and you have these conversations with them, and they get it and you get it. And it's normal to you. You have this network of chefs that's very normal to you. Oh, this person is a superstar. This person has a Michelin star or 2 or 3. And this person's on the world. It's no big deal. It's normal. They know you know them. And you think everyone is like that. But then you forget about the young cooks that are coming up and the people that maybe don't have access to that. And the reality is that's more than 99% of the people who work in the industry don't have access to the network that you and I have. And so part of what I wanted to do was, like, if I really want to put my money where my mouth is and I really want to help people, I think part of that is giving people mentorship. And part of that mentorship is just, showing them what's behind the curtain and allowing them to listen to these conversations with great chefs about what we're really talking about, the way we really think. And not that it's bad to figure it out on your own, but hey, you know what? I made a lot of mistakes. And if I could help you get to your destination a little bit faster and not make some of the same mistakes that I made, let me let you in and let me let you see how some of these chefs think. And let me bring you into the network without actually being in the network.
Who is the one person you hired that transformed your business?
That's such a tough question without offending anybody.
You don't have to give names. You don't have to give names.
I would say in the last position that I had, I will say a name. His name was Atticus Garant, and he's now the executive chef at the Fairmont in Banff Springs. They just got a Michelin key in their hotel. He's a phenomenal chef, and he and I opened up the last property together, and we sat around and we talked about how are we going to make this exceptional. And we sat around for days just thinking about workplace culture. And we talked about it, like, down to the minutia of, like, how are we going to say hello? How are we going to hold people accountable? How are we going to roll our apron? Where does the Sharpie go? What's the right way to sharpen a knife? And let's standardize everything so that way when people come into the kitchen, we could kind of have it on autopilot. Like, hey, we've figured out everything that you need to figure out. And that we're going to save you years of your career because we really thought about what the best methods are. So without him, I don't know that I could have been as successful in that last job that I had. So I would say he was definitely a game changer, Chef Atticus.
That's awesome. All right. The second one's on marketing, which I think I have the answer to already in my mind, but I want to hear what has been the most successful marketing decision that you've made.
Being out there. So here's an interesting thing. When I started Chefs PSA, it was just like the static post, right? Like, don't be a bad cook, with a little bit of a caption below it. And so I was talking to a friend of mine that's an influencer, and she told me, like, how are you doing videos? And this is maybe about 3 years ago. I was like, no. And she's like, you got to do videos. I was like, no, I don't like talking to the camera. I'm kind of shy. I don't want people. She's like, look, you have to understand that if you're not even, if you're not even doing it, you're not even in the game. Like, you're not going to grow your account. No one's going to know who you are. You have to do videos. And so like, okay, so I did the first couple, and they were really bad. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I would say just showing your face, showing your personality, is probably the best marketing decision I've ever done, because so many chefs out there, just put a picture of their food, and that's great. Food is pretty, but there's a million other people with pretty food. So why should I stop? Why should I stop and see what you're doing on your own marketing platform, which is your Instagram account or your Twitter, whatever, right? That is where people go to know everything about how you market yourself. And if the only thing you're showing me is some food that everyone else is showing me too, like, why am I going to stop and pay attention? And the second that you're able to show your personality, I think that's when people really engage with you.
Love it.
All right. Last one. What's the one tool you use every day?
Probably Canva.
There you go.
Yeah. Realistically, I use a lot of Canva. And then, so every day on Chefs PSA, I put up like a quote, and then there's a caption below it. And there's 2 comics after that usually kind of supports the quote in case you didn't get it. They don't always correlate, but usually I try to make sure that they have some sort of tie-in. And image creation with AI, I think is like, once I started figuring out how to use that, I was like, holy shit, this is mind blowing. So the other tool that I use a lot is, and there's a lot of different ones like DALL-E, but the one I use the most is called Midjourney, and it's like, it already knows how I think. It already knows how to create images, and it's already curated to my style. I'm extremely good at creating images now. Like, I I don't, and I use it so much. And the food images are actually really good with AI too. That, and I'll say this is kind of like a secret, but it shouldn't be, is that there's a lot of chefs out there that are putting up AI food. And I know it's AI because I use AI a lot. And I'm like, I know that's not real. And sometimes I want to call them out, but I'm like, I don't know if I should or not. But there's a lot. I'll tell you, like,
that's wild. I would never think that.
Oh, it's very prevalent. And because I work with it every day, I know what it looks like. I can tell you that that's not real food. But it looks just like real food.
Is there any way for the casual scroller to notice that it's AI? Or do you have to be really well versed in AI to be able to spot it?
If we're talking food, it just looks a little bit shinier. Like there's a certain gloss to the image that it looks,
and
almost
like the edges of things, right?
Yes.
And things like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like every now and again with AI food, what you'll find is like there'll be an ingredient on the plate that doesn't exist. So it's like that berry, like that doesn't exist in real life. Like, but the AI thinks it does. Like, oh, it kind of looks like raspberry, but it's like, well, it's not a raspberry. And I don't know what kind of berry that is. It's a snozberry. So if you want to pay attention, like if you look at some AI food pictures, like you'll notice, like, okay, everything else looks real, but that's not a real ingredient. That's not a real flower. That's not a real berry.
That's so crazy. That's so crazy.
Wow. That's crazy.
That's very common. It's way more common than I think people realize.
I'm gonna keep my eye out now. There is one question that I have left that we should have asked at the top of the hour. My bad for not asking it. And that is, what is one guilty pleasure that you have for $20 or less?
Oh, man.
And it can be anything. It can be food or non-food or whatever your guilty pleasure is.
For $20 or less, it's going to be food. And it's going to be, like, I'm a sucker for gas station food. And I know that's not great. Like, I'm talking about be mindful of your health. But if you go to the gas station,
It's an indulgence, it's okay.
yeah, you know what
Wait,
I
a
love?
particular gas station in Texas or any
No,
gas
no,
station?
just like as long as they have those powdered donuts that look like they're coated in Coke, uh,
Yep.
and cocaine, not Coca-Cola, but the ones like you get it and you look like Scarface when you're done eating.
Yeah.
That is my guilty pleasure. Like I am addicted to powdered sugar gas station.
Donuts.
Yeah, I love them.
Like donuts, like those little packages
Exactly.
of donuts. Yeah,
Yes.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I love those. I eat way too much of them.
There's a big debate amongst my two boys, who one is just turned 15 and one is 11, about, or I should say between powdered donuts and the chocolate donuts. It's
I'm
like
team chocolate.
one of them likes one and one of them likes the other, and they're both vehemently opposed to the other type, So it's always a thing. It's like whoever ends up going into the gas station with dad to pay is typically the one that gets to choose what the donut of the day is. But I hear you on
they're
that.
great.
I can respect the donut flex.
And I'm also a sucker for chips. I really do like chips. Like it could be any kind of chip. Like give me vinegar chips, give me dill pickle, give me Doritos. Like I don't care, except for Cool Ranch. I hate Cool Ranch. I don't know why. I just think it tastes terrible.
Wow.
But usually any other flavor of chips, I'm okay with.
Wow, you escaped the target, the focus group on the Cool Ranch flavor somehow. I don't know. One of only probably very few.